Because we really, really need you down here. From all the pain that we going through, we know that you real, so can you fall through? Father, have mercy when we call on you. I just want to fall on you. About 5 minutes. Waiting and to play with. I raise my children up to say the same shit. Dear Lord, I hope you hear my prayers, because we really, really need you down here. From all the pain that we going through, we know that you're real, so can you fall through? Father, have mercy when we call on you. But I just want to fall on you, to show the devils you ain't nothing to play with. I raise my children up to say the same shit.
Yeah. Go ahead. Come on, West. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Look, I keep it low to the T. U.P.K play for keeps. Ain't shit sweet. Got soldiers on deck, and my youngin' did a sweep. This a whole nother way. Tell him get the fuck off the beach. I'm in the field with the cleats. He ain't one of us here breach. Nigga, come through all black gully jack, man. All them niggas gon' retreat. Come through all black gully jack, man. All them niggas gon' retreat. I'm in the field with the cleats. He ain't one of us here breach. Come through all black gully jack, man. All them niggas gon' retreat, man. This shit is too easy. I'm on go, but they don't believe me. You know I'm winning with the team. Screaming Vinny, V's. Need them devils screaming out bloody murder. I'm about to close the curtain. I'm on my grind, bitch, I'm working. Sorry, all them lies, it ain't working. Them niggas weak, they be churching. I'm a West nigga, that's for certain. If they cross the line, I'm gonna back up and I'm gonna hit his ass with this virus. And I come through 300 strong, 144 Leonidas. All my niggas, we eat. Men this bitch with the itis. Say, all y'all do the street. They all do the street. The nigga made the wrong move, he make his ass obsolete. He ain't one of us hit the lead. He ain't one of us here preach. Come through all black gully jack, man. All them niggas go retreat. Look, I keep it low to the T. U.P.K play for keeps. Ain't shit sweet. Got soldiers on deck, and my youngin' did a sweep. This a whole nother way. Tell him get the fuck off the beach. I'm in the field with the cleats. He ain't one of us here breach. Nigga, come through all black gully jack, man. All them niggas gon' retreat. Come through all black gully jack, man. All them niggas gon' retreat. I'm in the field with the cleats. He ain't one of us here breach. Come through all black gully jack, man. All them niggas gon' retreat.
You see this look that's on my face, bitch, I'm for real with it. I hit the streets, put on my cleats, was in the field with it. You soft as cotton, just an actor, Uncle Phil with it. And then my target's on the move, but I can still hit it. Hey, I speak true cause it's necessary. Gullah Jack revolutionary. Cold on them like January. Commander Dinner is a visionary. Soul food, no sweets. Your preacher man, he's sweet. Matter of fact, he weak. It's wartime for peace. Think you hard, nigga, you ain't. Fuck with us, nigga, you can't. You smart cars, we tanks. We form up in ranks. We body bag this raw shit. All black, no bright shit. Real life, no cap, bitch. Fall on them, that's cap shit.
I keep it low to the T. U.P.K play for keeps. Ain't shit sweet. Got soldiers on deck, and my youngin' did a sweep. This a whole nother way. Tell him get the fuck off the beach. I'm in the field with the cleats. He ain't one of us here breach. Nigga, come through all black gully jack, man. All them niggas gon' retreat. Come through all black gully jack, man. All them niggas gon' retreat. I'm in the field with the cleats. He ain't one of us here breach. Come through all black gully jack, man. All them niggas gon' retreat.
Shalom, shalom, Yahweh Shem Yashai Barakatha to all the brothers, Yahweh Shemar Alatha Bashem Yashai to all the sisters. This is the I.S.U.P.K history class, Monday night. We're back at it. We got some history for you tonight, right? Throughout for tuning in. Before we start, don't forget to hit that sign-in link. Hit the sign-in link and thumb up the video. Share this video on all platforms, right? So we're going to be going into some of the history of the Israelites in Egypt, right? And one thing we could take away from the history of the Israelites in Egypt is separation is key, right? And Joseph, he first got into Egypt. He was sold into Egyptian captivity, right? He realized very fast that he needed to be separate, right? And when his brothers came, he, being a smart man that he was, right, he decided to separate his peoples from the Hamites, right, from the Egyptians that hated him. So that's what we're going to be going into today, right? We're going to be going into the Hyksos, right? And how the Hyksos at one point damn near ran all of Egypt, right? And that's because Joseph, he was a smart man. He made it so he basically cut out a whole industry, right? A whole industry for his brethren, for his people, for his kinsmen, right? So that's what we're going to be going into today. We got a couple precepts to go through as well, right? So we're going to be going through that. If you're watching, thumb up the video, right? So that's what we're going to be going through. Okay. Throughout assist for watching. Yahweh Shema Alatha Bashem Yashai. Right, so we got the Hyksos dynasty, right? And this is a dynasty that they said our oppressors, they described this dynasty as coming out of Palestine, right, or Palestinian, right? But we know that where you can locate Palestine today is exactly where the Israelites would be, right? What the Palestinians claim is their land today is, it's not their land. They're not supposed to be there. That is Israelite land, right? And the Hyksos, who were king shepherds, right, or captive shepherds, right, they come from the land of Canaan, right? We were already in the land of Canaan. We walked out of it due to famine. We walked right back into it 400 years later, right? And from 70 souls, we came out in the hundreds of thousands, right? So I got a little bit of reading that we're going to go into. Let's see something right quick. All right, so the Hyksos dynasty of Palestinian origin that ruled northern Egypt as a 15th century dynasty, as a 15th dynasty, right? So it got to a point where because Joseph, because he had great foresight, right? Not only could he interpret dreams, he had great foresight into realizing that we were going to become a mighty people, right? Just as it was prophesied for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? We were going to become a mighty people, and he made sure that we were separate in the land of Egypt, right? And that's key to what we need to do today in our captivity. We need to today be separate, right? We need to separate from our oppressors. Salakia. Right? Separation is definitely key. Right? The second intermediate period, Salakia, the origin that ruled northern Egypt as the 15th dynasty, the second intermediate period. The name Hyksos was used by Egyptian historian Manethos, right? Flourished 300 BCE. That's before Christ, right? They like to say before Common Era, but that is before Christ, or the world knows ignorantly as Christ, but we know because we're in the truth as Yahushua, who according to Jewish historian Flavius Josephus flourished 1st century CE, translated the word as king shepherds or captive shepherds. Right, so let's get some more into it. As the founder of the Egyptian 15th dynasty, Asiatics, who exercised political control over Egypt between approximately 1655 and 1570 BCE. The Hyksos established their capital at Avaris in the eastern delta, controlled the Nile Valley as far south as Hermopolis, and claimed overlordship over the rest of Upper Egypt. Avaris has been identified as Tel Dab, Tel El Dab in the northeast delta. Most of the Hyksos' personal names were West Semitic, right? So most of the Hyksos names were Shemitic names in the same language group as the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Aramaic dialects, right? Because again, we walked out of the land of Canaan, right, during a famine, looking for food, only to be reunited again with our brother Joseph, right? There seems to be no human name, Salakia, no Haran names as was once thought. Hyksos reflects Hikau Kohoswi, the rulers of foreign lands, right? So even within the name, the Hyksos name, you can see that they had us as foreign rulers, right? The name given them by their Egyptian contemporaries. They were also referred to as Asiatics, right? And it's common known that part of the world, especially the lands that would be Israelite lands now, right? From Turkey to Afghanistan down to Saudi Arabia, they called it the Asiatic, right? Or East Salakia, Asia Minor and Asia Major. The standard name for the inhabitants of the Eastern Mediterranean littoral, Canaan and Syria. Having infiltrated into the Nile Valley over a period of several centuries, they managed to seize the kingship during the chaotic period which ended the Egyptian Middle Kingdom. At the beginning of the 18th dynasty, right, Pharaoh Amez expelled the Hyksos from Egypt and pursued them to South Palestine. Right, so let's go more into this. Most of the archaeological data of the Hyksos come from sites in the eastern delta. Among these are Tel Adaba, the largest Tel El Maskahata, and Tel El Yahuda. Right? These are the names of the places where the Israelites were in Egypt. Other information comes from the scarabs and the monuments from various sites in Nubia and Palestine, as well as Egypt. The material available at present shows Hyksos culture to be that of Middle Bronze Age, Palestine, or Phoenicia. In the course of time, Hyksos material culture shows increasing Egyptianizing features. Scholars debate the extent of the evidence of Hyksos fortifications, with some comparing embankments found at Ta'el Yahudiya. Right, so we're going to get some more into this. Let's get, where do we want to go to? We're going to go into Genesis 41. Genesis 41. Let's start at 39. Verse 39. Genesis 41. 39. Yeah, let's get this one right here. 49 to 42. Right, so Genesis 41, 39, verse 39. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, for as much as God has showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. 40. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. 41. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. Right? So there was a point when, because Joseph was so wise, he was making a lot of decisions in Egypt. Right? In the course of time, Hyksos material shows increasing Egyptianizing features. Scholars debate the extent of the evidence of the Hyksos fortification. Right? Let's jump down some. The horse and the chariot made their appearance in Egypt during the rule of the Hyksos, but there is no evidence that they were introduced specifically by the Hyksos. Distinctively, Hyksos is a new type of ceramic called Ta'al Yahudiya ceramics, named after a center of Hyksos population, now called Ta'al Yahudway Salakia. where this type was first discovered. The vessels which characterize this group of ceramics are small juglets and bowls, brown, gray in color, decorated with geometric designs, and made of punctures filled with white chalk. As might be expected, the Hyksos initially retained their Levantine religious traditions, including the royal and Salakia, the royal ancestor cult. Gradually, Egyptian elements were borrowed and synthesized. Let's get back into, let's go to verse 42. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain upon his neck. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had. And they cried before him, bow the knee. And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. Right? So there was a point where Joseph, he was ruler over all of Egypt. Right? And that's because he helped Egypt when he was in captivity in Egypt. There was a great famine, right? And famine was all over the place, right? And Joseph, he was able to store up so much food that when the famine struck, he was able to sell the food back to the people, right? Sell the wheat back to the people. Let's jump to 41:55. This is Genesis 41:55. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, go to Joseph. What he saith to you, do. Right? 56. And the famine was over all the face of the earth. Right? So all the known land at this point, there was famine. Right? And the people they were going hungry. Right? So the people were going hungry in Egypt. 56. And the famine was over all the face of the earth. And Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold unto the Egyptians. And the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. 57. And all the countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because that the famine was so sore in all the lands. Right? So again, there was major famine in all the lands. Right? And Joseph, him being so smart and being able to interpret the dreams, he knew that this famine was coming. Right? So he had Egyptians storing up food for this specific time, right? And with his knowledge of interpreting these dreams and how to get out of the famine, right? He became second in Egypt next to the Pharaoh, right? And because Joseph was second in Egypt, he would later be able to set up his people in a land where they could operate freely, right? Just like this is well, we'll get to that part, but coming out of the anniversary of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the Tulsa massacres, this is exactly what we need to do. We need to separate, right? So we're gonna get more into that. Let's go into 42. 42 and 6. And Joseph was the governor over the lands. This is Genesis 42 and verse 6. And Joseph was the governor over the lands, and it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. Right? And Joseph saw his brothers and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them. Right? So just like what we were reading earlier, Joseph being in rulership, he at that moment he appeared as an Egyptian, right? He dressed as an Egyptian, even though he wasn't keeping he wasn't worshiping their gods. He wasn't doing the customs of the Egyptians, right? So much so that Joseph was not like your pastors today, like the leaders of the Black, Hispanic, and Native communities today outside of the I.S.U.P.K, where they not just dress themselves as the Egypts, they fully embrace it, right? Our so-called leaders in the Black, Hispanic, and Native community today, they embrace being like the heathen. They embrace being like their captors, right? And you wonder why the Black, Hispanic, and Native American community is the way it is, and is in the state that it's in right now. Because our leaders, our so-called leaders, don't care about us enough to want to see us be separate, right? They're taking their little crumbs, right? They're taking their little crumbs and they're content because they get to stuff their gullet with it. They get to stuff their face with the crumbs that they get right now, right? Instead of telling Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, if you separate and love each other and take yourself out of the culture of our oppressors, you're not going to be just getting crumbs, right? You'll be able to take care of your people, right? You think about Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma. You think about Greenwood, Seneca Village. Out east in Canada, we had Africville, right? You think about all those places where we had to build up without the oppressor, right? That's what we could be. We could be separate. We could be totally separated from our oppressors in every way and not have to beg them for any crime, any justice that you're never going to receive. Right? Let's get some more into our reading. Right, 1 second. He made his identification partially following Manetho, who made the expelled Hyksos together with the host of the founders of Jerusalem, and partially because the Hyksos were shepherds and captives. And indeed, sheep breeding was a hereditary custom of the remotest ancestors. And Joseph told the king of Egypt that he was a captive, right? Following assumptions of Menethos, Josephus, some scholars have attempted to set the Exodus within chronological framework of the 18th dynasty. There's no warrant either in the Bible or outside it for simply equating the Hyksos with the later Hebrews, although it is not impossible, right? So even though they know that the Hebrews were the shepherd kings and that the Hebrews had rulership of Egypt at one point, they still kind of want to rule it out, but they still say that it's not impossible that this could have happened, that some of the later may have been ultimately descendants from some of the Hyksos, right? So like, most people are going to battle and say that the Egyptians, Salakia, that the Israelites weren't in Egypt, right? Even though we know that the Israelites were shepherds, we also know that the Egyptians, they didn't like shepherding, right? They thought it was a task, it was a job that was beneath them, right? Shepherding for the Egyptians is like, it's like how you'll have successful people who look down at a job such as working in a McDonald's or working in Salakia. I'm trying to think of another trade, just a trade that they didn't deem a trade that was of them, right? If we jump to 43, let's jump to Genesis 43 right quick. 43 and 32 for a second, right? And Joseph, let's jump to 30, Genesis 43 and 30. And Joseph made haste, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother, and he sought where to weep. And he entered into his chamber and he wept there, right? So this is when Joseph sees his younger brother Benjamin and his brothers, and he missed his brother, so he wanted to cry, right? He wanted to weep. 31. And he washed his face and went out and refrained himself and set aside and said, set Salakia, and said, set on the bread. And they sent for him by himself. And they set on for him by himself. And for them by themselves, and for Egyptians which did eat with him by themselves, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination unto the Egyptians. And they sat before him, and the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men marveled one at another. And he took and sent masses unto them from before him. But Benjamin's Benjamin's measures was 5 times so much as any of theirs, and they drunk and were merry with him. Right? So you're seeing that the Egyptians, they didn't want to eat with the Hebrews, right? Because they thought of them as they were just shepherds, right? And they felt it was beneath them to sit with shepherds. Hold up 1 second. Okay, so the Hyksos with their later Hebrews, although it's not impossible that some of the later may have ultimately descended from some of the Hyksos, of special significance is the fact that some of the Hyksos rulers bore names echoed in the Bible. That one of the kings of the period is named Shishai, which is similar to the name of Shishai, one of the ruling families in the Karath Arba. The Hyksos are not mentioned explicitly in the Bible, but some reminiscence of them can be detected, right? That's just like saying Jamaicans or Mexicans aren't mentioned in the Bible, right? It's just different names at the time. The connection made by Josephus and Menathos with the Exodus is correct in the extent that the traditions of descent into Egypt and Exodus were therefrom were at least in part inspired by distant memories of the Hyksos movements read for. There are two instances where the history of the Hyksos is connected with the Palestine. The first is during the beginning of their penetration into Egypt, since their dominance over Lower Egypt must have preceded by control over Palestine, right? So there was a point where Salakia, where Jacob and his sons and his daughters they lived in the land of Canaan, right? The second is during the decline of the Hyksos when they were expelled from Egypt by the rulers of the dynasty northward toward the southern Palestine, right? So just like we read a whole bunch of times, there was a pharaoh that didn't know of Joseph and how he saved Israel, Salakia, Egypt. Right, so let's get back into, let's go to 47, Genesis 47. Genesis 47, 3 and 5. Salakia. We're going to read Genesis 47 and 3. Right? Let's just start at the top. Genesis 47. Then Joseph came and told Pharaoh and said, my father and my brethren and their flocks and their herds and all that they have are come out of the land of Canaan. And behold, they are in the land of Goshen. Right? And he took some of his bread, even 5 men, and presented them unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto his brethren, what is your occupation? And they said unto Pharaoh, thy servants are shepherds. Right? And just like they said, Hyksos was captive shepherds. Thy servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers. For they said moreover unto Pharaoh, for to sojourn in the land are we come, and thy servants have no pastures for their flocks. for the famine is sore in the land of Canaan. Now, therefore, we pray thee, let thy servants dwell in the land of Goshen. Right? So that's where Salakia. The election is where we stayed separate from the Egyptians. And that's why it was so easy for us to separate when it was time. Right? We didn't have to, when it was time for Moses to gather the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt with the help of the Most High, right? Strictly with the help of the Most High. It was so easy because we are already separated. And Pharaoh spoke unto Joseph, saying, thy father and thy brethren are come unto thee, and the land of Egypt is before thee. In the best of the land make thy father and brethren to dwell, in the land of Goshen. Let them dwell, and if thou knowest any man of activity amongst them, then make them rulers over my cattle. Right? So that's what Joseph did. He basically got his brothers and he got his brethren to be separate from our oppressor, right? He got his brethren to, they basically carved out a whole industry for themselves, right? Of shepherding, of husbanding, right? Of the farming and taking care of the cattle, right? The jobs that the Egyptians don't want to do, right? And this is so you could actually see this right now, right? Think about who does all the landscaping, right? The Northern Kingdom does majority of the landscaping, right? You rarely see anybody get up and say, you know what, I want to do landscaping. I want to cut your lawn. I want to do all the farming. You go up north right now and you'll see all the Benjamites on the farms, right? And this is what we're supposed to do. Instead of running quickly to give all our money back to the oppressors when we get it, we're supposed to be amongst ourselves, right? To a point where we control that industry, right? Verse 5. And Pharaoh, oh, Salaki, I think I read that already. Verse 7. And Joseph brought in Jacob his father and set him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh said unto Jacob, how old art thou? And Jacob said unto Pharaoh, the days of the year of my pilgrimage are 133 years and 30 years. Few and evil have the days of the years of my life been, and have not attained unto the days of the years of my life of my fathers, in the days of their pilgrimage. Right? So let's get back into some of this. Hyksos, a people mixed of Semitic, right, and Asian descent who invaded Egypt and settled in the Nile, right? You could just get rid of that whole Asian descent, but the Semitic. Now, they'll try to say Asian because of the Asia Minor and Asia Major, right? But they said we settled in the Nile Delta, right? Pharaoh said, as we read earlier, the best of the lands. They formed the 15th and 16th dynasties of Egypt and ruled a large part of the country until driven out, right? So until they made us slaves, we were definitely in control, right? And that's to let you know you don't have to go to go to your oppressor and beg for anything, right? You just have to work with your own. You just have to separate from them. Don't worship their gods, and eventually you'll be on top, right? Culturally, we blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, everyone wants to be like us anyways. Now imagine if we decided to love each other. Imagine if we decided to follow the Most High's laws, where we would be, right? We would be high above all nations, just like it says in Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy 28, right? Just like it says in Deuteronomy 21 and 8, 20, in Deuteronomy 28 and 1, that if we keep the commandments of the Most High, we would be high above all nations. Let's see if we can get some more. Hold up. Bear with me. I gotta pull up the next article. Bear with me. Right. So they in this article, I got it saying Hyksos was in fact probably an Egyptian term for rulers of foreign lands. Right. Egypt was not our land. Right. Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, we were in Egypt, but we are not the Egyptians. Right? We were the rulers of foreign lands, meaning Egypt is a foreign land to us. It's somewhere we went because there was a famine in the land, right? And in our separation from our oppressors, we ended up ruling these lands, right? And this is why you'll have one of the pharaohs turn around and say, "Let us deal wisely." Right? Let's get that. Right, let's go to Exodus 1 and 10. Right, Exodus 1 and 10. Actually, let's jump to 8. Exodus 1 and 8. Now there rose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. Verse 9. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more mightier than we. Right? That's because we were separate. We didn't have to worry about drugs in our community. We didn't have to worry about Egyptians coming to kill us. We didn't have to worry about things that plague us now, like abortion and black on black crime, right? So we became a mighty people, right? And the Egyptian Pharaoh, he's seen that we were becoming more mightier, right? And that's because we stayed to ourselves. And he said unto his people, Behold, the children of Israel are more mightier than we. Verse 10. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land, right? And this is every oppressor's nightmare. The oppressor, he always thinks that blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans were gonna go and decide to wage war, when we do actually the opposite, right? We're not looking to wage war against our oppressors, right? We're just trying to survive. We're just trying to just do us, right? But the oppressor, he always thinks that the more we grow, that we're gonna turn around and try to choose sides and fight them, right? Where if you leave blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans alone, we won't even. We're just gonna keep doing us and just grow, right? Look at all the times that they've left blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans alone. We've always just grown. When our oppressor was eating dust cookies during the Depression, we had our townships growing, right? They had to bomb us and they had to drop explosives from planes just so they could feel that we were they were on the same level as us. Because while they were going through their depression, we were making millionaires, right? We had to do everything for ourselves. When they were going through a depression, we had to buy within ourselves, and our money circulated within our community about 10, you could say 10 to 15 times before it would even leave the community. Right now, with the state of blacks, Hispanics as it is, when we get money, it's gone within 5 minutes. As soon as you get your paycheck, you spend it, and you spend it with some oppressor, right? Some heathen nation that is high amongst you is where your money goes, right? And these heathen nations, they don't consider us even to be human, right? All they want to do is get rich off of us. Look at all the industries. Sisters would do hair, the men would do every single type of trade. Like sisters, and between the brothers and sisters, when we were separated, we were Salakia, you just think about it. We had to do everything for ourselves. We had doctors, we had lawyers. If you had a car and it was broken down, you had to go to some brother to get your car fixed. If you wanted a brand new suit, you had to go to some brother or sister who was a tailor or seamstress to get your clothes made. Right? Now you just take your money and you go right to the nearest what do we spend our money in? You go to Gap, you go to Old Navy, you go to the Bay, just anywhere they sell anything is where we go and buy, right? We don't even, before you want a steak, you'd have to go to a brother who was a farmer, right? Who was a butcher, and he would do the farming and the butchering, and that's how we kept our money within our community. Slovakia. All right, so let's get some more into this. The rise of the Hyksos kings in Egypt was made possible by an influx of immigrants from Palestine into Egypt, being about the 18th century BCE. right? The immigrants brought with them new technologies, including horses and chariots, the compound bow, and improved metalwork weapons. Salakia. And improved metal weapons. Most of them settled in the eastern portion of the Nile Delta, where they achieved a dominant role in trade with Western Asia. Archaeological excavations in that area have revealed a Canaanite-style temple. Palestinian-type burials included horse burials. Slovakia, right? Types of pottery, quantities of their superior weapons, and a series of Minoan fresco that demonstrate stylistic parallels to those of Knossos and Thera. The most prominent settlement was Avaris, modern Tel Aldaba, a fortified camp over the remains of the Middle Kingdom town in the northeastern delta. Their chief deity, let's get away from that. Their chief deity was the sequence of events that brought the Hyksos kings to power in Lower Egypt is not entirely clear, right? But all you have to do is you just have to read your Bible and you'll find out what happened. Basically, Joseph gave our people our own industry, and that's how we reigned. That's how we got power and grew exceedingly in Lower Egypt. Some scholars have suggested that a famine in the Delta region contributed to their decline and opened a way of emergence of the Hyksos dynasty. And the Nile Valley was far south near present-day As-Yut. The contemporaneous 16th dynasty rulers, minor Hyksos kings who ruled in Upper Egypt simultaneously with those of the 15th dynasty. Hold up. Let's get back to bear with me. Right? So let's get back to this. Minor Hyksos kings who ruled in Upper Egypt simultaneously with those of the 15th dynasty were probably vassals of the later group. When under Sequen and Kamos, the the bands began to rebel. The Hyksos pharaoh Apophis tried unsuccessfully to make an alliance with the rulers of Cush who had overrun Lower Nubia in the later years of the 13th dynasty. Right, so here you're seeing that eventually, right, trying to make deals with other nations, with the other Kush nations, right, led to the downfall of the Israelites in Egypt, right? We weren't supposed to be making deals with other nations. We're supposed to keep to ourselves, right? And that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to keep to ourselves and not worry about what the other nations have to offer us, or what Salakia, what they do. We're not supposed to be in the culture of the other nations. Salakia, one moment. Right. So again, we need to separate, right? Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, we definitely need separation. We didn't get a land in Egypt. We didn't get lands in Egypt by saying we wanted to be like the pharaohs, right? Being Sticking to your culture, right, is what made the Egyptians not want to be around us, right? Us being shepherd kings, right, or captive shepherds is what made us get the land of Goshen, right? And we could do that now, right? You don't have to go to your oppressor and ask him to do anything for you. All you got to do is just love your brothers and sisters. Get in the ISUPK and learn how to love your brothers and sisters, right? Let's find something right quick. 1 second. Right, let's get to Revelations 18:4. Right, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, that ye receive not of her plagues." Right, That's what we need to do. We need to come out of the culture of the oppressor, right? Loving the oppressor is not going to do anything for you except have you marching in the streets saying hands up, don't shoot, right? And we do that well. We've been saying hands up, don't shoot for decades, right? And it's never gotten us anywhere, right? The only place it's ever gotten us is at the bottom, right? And why be like the one moment, right? It's never gotten us anywhere. We need to basically we gotta come out of this idea of loving your oppressor is going to get you somewhere, right? Every time you think that you have to love your oppressor, another black boy is killed, another black daughter of ours, another black Hispanic and Native American daughter, she's kidnapped, right? Because you think you gotta love your oppressor, right? You think that you gotta send them to someone's house to go knock for candy because it's Halloween, right? That eventually gives your child the mentality that he needs to go to, or she needs to go to the oppressor for little trinkets, and that's never gotten us anywhere, right? One second. That has never gotten us anywhere, right? The only thing that gets us is when we love our oppressors is we end up falling by the edge of the sword, right? Let's go to Luke 21 and 24. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Right? That's what happens when you are told and taught that you have to love your oppressor. Right? You don't have to love your oppressor at all. Right? Salakia, one moment. Now, all you need to do is gather together, right? And we're doing that in the I.S.U.P.K right now. We're gathering together so we can be out of captivity, right? There is a way to get out of this captivity. Hold up. Right, so let's get to Zephaniah 2 and 1. Right, so Zephaniah 2 and 1. Gather yourselves together. Yea, gather together, O nation not desired. Right? We are that nation not desired. Right? We're that nation not desired. And as soon as you realize that who you are not an Egyptian, but you are more the Israelites than anything, right? Soon as you realize that, that's when you'll be able to come out of this captivity, right? We're gonna continue with this next week, and Salakia for the short class. We're gonna continue with this next week and work on a part 2, right? And I'll have more of the images and more of the history of the Egyptians, of the Israelites in Egypt, right? Salakia, we're going to continue next week. We're going to have more of the history of the the Israelites in Egypt, and I'll have it more detailed for you. And I'll give you we'll finish up this breakdown. So for now, this is going to be a part 1, and next week we'll have a part 2. Salakia. Hold up. Let me get the security announcements. I.S.U.P.K security announcements. We are the I.S.U.P.K, started out of 1 West, 125th Street, Harlem, New York. Rules for new brothers and sisters. When a new brother or sister comes into the school, they are off limits for 6 months. They are to be saluted only. They are here to shed themselves of the world. If they need transportation, the teacher will arrange it. After 6 months, if a brother or sister has an interest in a particular person, he or she must get permission from the head to speak to a brother or sister. There is another 6 months in which the brother and sister will court each other. After this 6-month period, the brother and sister will get permission from the head to marry. Tithes, which is a commandment, Numbers 18 and 21, Malachi 3 verses 8 to 10. Ma'ashur, which means tenth in Hebrew, 10% of every penny of any increase the Lord gives you. Give to the treasury department or teacher. Priest fund, free will offering for priests, not mandatory. Whatsoever amount you would like. Up and coming holy convocations is the Feast of First Fruits, which is coming up June 21st. If you are in Montreal, get with Officer 1000 ADR. Toronto will be there'll be an address becoming available in the next coming days for where we'll be having the Feast of First Fruits. Don't forget to check ISUPK.com for any up and coming information. If anybody wants to be a trooper in the school, start wearing all black, boots, shirts, pants, headband, and scarf. With that said, class is dismissed.